The Bogosity Podcast, early and ad-free. Become a subscriber at Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord. Use the links at donate.bogosity.tv.
Welcome to the Bogosity Podcast for the week of August 23, 2026, the podcast that never saw a better one. This is your host, Shane Killian. Next week is the 5th weekend in the month, and that means no podcast. But for now, let's banalize the news of the bogus. This one's big, people. A new paper published in the journal Nature has just blown a hole in basically every anti-AI claim involving image generation. The claim, which is at the center of so many lawsuits, is that AIs just imitate the works of artists, and an artist's painting being in the training data is what allows the AI to create something similar, and that, according to their legal briefs, means copyright infringement. They want credit. They want to be paid a license fee. They want to be paid in damages. And it turns out, the entire basis for their claim is as false as it can be. The research from MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, or CSAIL, shows that for any model trained on any sufficiently large dataset, you can remove any single image from the training data, any individual artist's portfolio, or every single portrait of a given person, and it doesn't alter the outputs in any detectable way. And that being the case, it means that that artwork or portrait or image doesn't have any responsibility for the final output. Quote, "Here, we show that models trained with enough data often generate samples that are unattributable. We establish this through a large-scale analysis of what-if scenarios, revealing that we can often omit any sample or creator from the training data without affecting a generated sample. Models work on the aggregate, taking every image they've ever seen and not memorizing them, but learning in general how images work and how they're associated with prompts, faces, poses, and various other aspects that can be used as inputs to generate something novel." Lead author Zhang Dai said, quote, "If you take away a piece of data and the output of the model doesn't change, then that piece of data didn't affect the output. So it doesn't make much sense to attribute the output to that piece of data. And if you then do this one at a time for every other piece of data and find that the output doesn't change for any of them either, then it doesn't make much sense to attribute the output to any one of them." This is something that's been known about diffusion models from the start, at least to everyone who has a basic understanding of the theory behind how they work, but this is the first time we have direct and unmistakable proof of it. Co-author David K. Gifford said, quote, "All previous methods were approximate. They really could not absolutely show that deleting individual things did not change the output. This paper introduces the first method that is absolute. You're actually deleting the inputs and deleting all influences of the inputs. This is the first exact method for doing large-scale deletion efficiently and showing that the results don't change." To do this, they built an architecture called Diffusion Ensemble. Instead of one gigantic multi-gigabyte model, they made 24 ensembles on variably sized datasets of 7 publicly accessible image datasets. That let them switch off parts of the models that were based on a particular image, no retraining needed, and the results are definitive, not approximate. They then put their model head-to-head with 24 diffusion models trained the conventional way on the exact same data. By every standard measure, the images produced by the ensemble were every bit as good as the conventionally trained models. In fact, some were actually better. Turns out, the more training data, the better the ensembles held up against their single model counterparts. They even stress-tested their own results to control for other model features such as ablation, number of training epochs, class conditioning, and several others. And the results surprised even the researchers. Gifford said, quote, "One way to think about this is that these models are creative. They are not simply copying what they are fed, but creating brand new outputs. If those outputs have nothing to do with any individual piece of training data, that raises questions about fair use, about whether the outputs are themselves copyrightable as novel works, and about how authors get compensated when what comes out of a model isn't attributable to anything on the internet. Which spells trouble for many of the anti-AI lawsuits, which claim that the work of particular artists are being infringed in the outputs. Because if you can remove their work and get the same result, that's not infringement. That's fair use. Cornell law professor James Grimmelman said, quote, "If attribution worked, it would reliably tell us whether similarities between a model's output and a copyright-protected work are due to copying or coincidence. But this paper provides reason to think that attribution will fail for interesting models. Instead, technologists and courts will need to resort to other methods for assessing copying." And remember, this isn't just some fly-by-night research paper. It's from the prestigious MIT, peer-reviewed and published in one of the most respected science journals in the world. And that paper found, quote, "Unattributability is an important consideration for the governance of generative models. A notable example is the commercial use of generative models trained on copyrighted material to produce market substitutes of said material. In this case, unattributability ostensibly provides a refutation of access, a key element used in establishing infringement. On the one hand, attribution decay means that models are naturally endowed with a privacy property that arises when they are trained on enough data. For example, our experiments show that generated images of people are often causally independent of the people who were used to train it, effectively preserving their privacy as long as sufficient data was used to train the generative model. Which should put the kibosh on not only the copyright lawsuits, but any claims that these models can be used to create abusive material of real people. In other words, every single reason to regulate them is now thoroughly debunked.
Presenting the greatest game this side of Yuggoth. You are H.P. Lovecraft's cat, and your name is Nick. Right, we can't say that on a podcast. Well, anyway, that's the point. Your name is a joke, so now you are out for revenge. You become a Necronomic cat. Using the Necronomicon, you come to the present day to buy a cat. That's a gun. For a cat. It's a fat cat. But the Necronomicon is treacherous, and it read in Lovecraft's monsters. Now, in a crumbling world, you must fight. Build your team, buy guns and armor, buy items of dubious legality, defeat the bosses of each level, then take Lovecraft down. Play Necronomicat. The link is at cat.bogosity.tv. Yeah, we're doing cat.bogosity.tv, not that other one. What, you want me to get kicked off the internet or something?
Oh, while we're destroying myths, let's talk data centers. We've busted several of these myths already. For example, it's not just about AI. That's still less than 20% of what data centers do. It's mostly about the apps you run, both at home and at work, and especially on your mobile devices. And the biggest offender is by far streaming video. It also doesn't use all that much power and water. Big numbers are being used to scare you without a comparison to what we'd be doing without the data centers, which make practically everything more efficient. And here's a new one: existential dread of the internet. A heat map news poll found that 75% of Americans would oppose a data center being built where they lived, with 61% saying strongly oppose. That's up from 24% just a year ago. Amazing what fearmongers in the news media can do. It's incredible how propaganda can get people to oppose their best interests. Data centers, far from causing problems, have massive economic benefits for their surrounding areas. For example, A local data center generated so much money for Loudoun County, Virginia, that they were able to cut everybody's property taxes. Nick Claremont of the Free Press got a lot of likes from his ex-post, which said, "I think the data center backlash is, at a deeper cultural level, the expression of people recognizing that the internet is on net simply bad. It is our generation's version of environmentalist opposition to nuclear power, a highly irrational on the face of it sublimation of the cultural horror at nuclear weapons. And in that sense, it is right. The internet since the dawn of social media is an awful, inhuman, net negative force for evil in life, and we should turn it off, however nice the affordances of Spotify and Google Maps may be." But as Reason's Robbie Suave wrote about the sudden opposition of political leaders to social media, quote, "I don't think the proposition the internet itself is bad is actually up for debate. Is it really possible to argue that human beings were better off without it? The idea that this is why people don't like data centers strikes me as implausible, since the opposition to data centers frequently cites misguided but tangible criticisms like electricity costs, water usage, and noise. I suppose it's possible that these criticisms are manifestations of some deeper existential dread, but is that likely? No, it doesn't seem like it. Not based on how much we actually rely on the internet. It's just another case of people falling for myths perpetuated by political interests without really thinking about it. And the poll found that this negativity applied to rural and other Republican-strong areas as well. That's what caused PJ Media's Scott Pinkster to wonder, for whatever reason, American voters are indifferent to pandering. I don't know why. So it shouldn't be a jaw-dropping revelation that Republicans have stooped to pandering on the data center issue. Nobody should be surprised. It's the perfect storm for shallow, uninformed political opportunism. As he points out, they're already unpopular, but because the technology is so new, its supporters haven't really galvanized. To go back to the comparison to nuclear power, look at how many decades it's taken for supporters of nuclear power to finally make headway. And look at how many wasted years we had of pollution and fears of climate change while we repressed our very economic prosperity. The anti-data center movement will go the same way. Just take a listen to this histrionic political ad for Tom Tiffany, congressman for Wisconsin's 7th District.
Meet data center David Crowley.
There's an opportunity for us to really become AI and a data hub for not only for the entire country, but for the entire globe.
And he wants you to pay for it. Data center David Crowley won't roll back data center tax incentives. Our lakes run dry. Family farms paved over. Why? Because Crowley's campaign is funded by the people building them. Data center David Crowley. Big tech wins. Wisconsin pays.
Lakes run dry because data centers use 17 billion gallons of water. Oh my God, that's a huge number. That must be bad. Except, as Pinkster points out, it's just 0.14% of America's water consumption. Barely a rounding error. Residential car washes use 100 billion gallons annually, and private swimming pools use 120 billion. Golf courses use even more, 531 billion gallons a year. Pinsker kept going, quote, "One more, we lose 900 billion gallons of water annually to leaky pipes. Corn irrigation uses 1,860 billion gallons, and residential lawn care uses 2,900 billion gallons of water each year. So why aren't politicians banning private swimming pools, golf courses, corn chips, and lawn care? Why attack data centers? You already know why. Crass political expediency. It's as simple as that. It's just more neo-Luddism that needs to stop." And his analysis, which you should absolutely read, of how all this pandering is an economic dead end is right on. That is a humongous cost just to give Tiffany a little boost in the polls. I wish more people would see how this comes directly from the Marxist playbook. As Suave said, Advocates for building new data centers need to do a better job explaining to the public that they create huge amounts of value for the country overall as well as the communities where they're built. And as Pinkster said, the trouble is that opposing data centers is anti-growth, anti-prosperity, and anti-innovation. Not only will it make Americans poorer and prices higher, but it also surrenders the AI arms race to communist China. And if AI is as revolutionary as its harshest critics claim, that's the last thing we ought to be doing. And what should we be doing? How do we win this? Quote, "We win by showing voters why the socialists are wrong and explaining how free markets are better." Couldn't have said it any better myself.
I'm brother Ezekiel, and I know how naughty thou hast been. So naughty, thou needst a VPN. Hide thy iniquity from prying eyes, and make sure the liturgical authorities remain ignorant. Take thy browser to bpn.bogosity.tv to get BoxPN. At $6.36 a month, a price only the most penurious would balk at, thou shalt have unlimited high-speed connections to servers all over the globe. And they don't log connections. Thy privacy is assured. That should please you sinners. Just remember, the Lord sees all. When traveling, make it look like thou art still home. At home, ensure the elders at your ISP don't take out their judgment with traffic shaping and DMCA notices. Up to 5 devices can connect at once, almost one for every deadly sin. Keep thy sins private. Go to bpn.bogosity.tv.
It's the law. What happens between you and your doctor stays between you and your doctor unless you personally approve otherwise. Well, except for when the government wants to look in on what you're doing. Under HIPAA, hospitals, physicians, insurers, and their business associates are prohibited from sharing your information unless you okay it. Or if the government wants it. Title 45, Section 164.512 of the U.S. Code gives a lot of situations where the government is entitled to your data, a long and complex and confusing list that's ripe for abuse. And now, RFK Jr. is pushing for even more ways to sweep up all of our medical records. Such as sweeping up everyone's vaccine data to cherry-pick examples to show that vaccines cause autism. So they've been pushing state health information exchanges to get data on the medical records of some 90% of Americans. For a medical question that was decisively solved long ago, vaccines do not cause autism. Autism has genetic roots, and the causes and development of autism way predate even the first vaccines. Pulling everyone's records into a single database doesn't only mean unwarranted searches by government, but also opening us up to cybersecurity breaches. The promised anonymization techniques have been shown to be insufficient for years, especially now that AI can be used to go through every single available identifier. We've talked about this before in the OpenAI cases, where the New York Times and a lot of other news outlets successfully grabbed the private conversations of tens of millions of Americans using anonymization techniques that OpenAI showed directly and clearly did not work. That didn't sway the judge in that case, so there's no reason to think it won't stand in any other court either. A study in Nature specifically showed that stripping identifiers from patient records, including chest x-rays, electrocardiograms, and electronic health records, did not protect the identities of all patients equally. They found that it's especially easy to target cancer and pain patients, and also for people of minority races, insurance status, or diagnosis. The government pays lip service to privacy, pretending that it's still a world where our data is written on dead trees and stuck in filing cabinets. It's not going to work in today's online world. And make no mistake, they know that. I want want to tell you about the eyeglasses I've been wearing for years. As people can see on my videos, I have a very strong prescription, which makes glasses more expensive, especially when I need computer glasses, reading glasses, prescription sunglasses, and most expensively, progressive lenses for general everyday wear. To save money while still getting quality glasses, I get them from Firmoo. In fact, I just got a pair of progressives with high-index aspherical lenses and a nice pair of frames my wife loves for just over $100. It would have been $500 to give them through my eye doctor. Not only do they look good, the glasses are durable. I've worn many pairs for several years without problems. All orders come with a 30-day return policy, a 3-month warranty, and one-on-one customer service. Go to Firmoo, that's FIRMOO.Bogosity.tv anytime you need quality glasses at a low price. Once again, that's Firmoo.Bogosity.tv. And now it's time to spiritualize this week's biggest Bogon emitter. So by now, you can hardly have missed the story of Jason Arday, probably the greatest con man of the 21st century. Well, except for the fact that he got caught. He obtained a professorship of sociology at the University of Cambridge, but he did it by plagiarizing his research and filling in any blanks with made-up data. I mean, sounds like a typical sociologist to me. There are a lot of questionable things about his appointment, including his young age, his slim track record, few publications, and, at best, underqualified. Then people started noticing that a lot of his publications sounded awfully familiar. Having his academic fraud exposed led to Arday apparently committing suicide. There's no one person who exposed him. It came from a lot of directions, but one of the most significant was Nathan Kofnes, postdoctoral researcher at Ghent University in Belgium. And the university just suspended him. Kofnes posted to X, "I was just suspended by Ghent University. They will almost certainly fire me." The decision was made by Rector Petra de Sutter, a former leader of the Green Party. None other than Sabina Hassenfelder replied, "These people have totally lost it." By the way, Kofnes also exposed Sutter for using ChatGPT to write her inaugural speech, which was full of fabricated quotes. Kofnes' suspension was confirmed by Ghent University, meaning that it's not just Sutter acting alone. Kofnes had previously lost his position at Cambridge in 2024 for his public criticism of DEI in academia. So, of course, he's now being attacked for racism since Arday was black. De Sutter wrote in a statement, "Over the past few days, Ghent University has received many inquiries following the death of Cambridge professor Jason Arday. We wish to be clear about the values we uphold as a university." Oh, regrettably, I think you're doing that. Quote, "Ghent University stands for respect for human dignity and opposes discrimination, hatred, and racism. We attach great importance to academic freedom and to open academic debate, even when views are controversial. However, that freedom is not unlimited. It goes hand in hand with responsibility and may be restricted in order to protect the rights of others." What, the rights of fraudsters not to have their fraud exposed? I really don't get the hill some people choose to die on. It's that sort of thing where you find out who has academic integrity and who doesn't. And if you're going to let very misguided politics let you defend a con artist over those who exposed him, you don't have any integrity at all, academic or otherwise. So all of that makes Ghent University this week's biggest Bogon emitter. Are you looking for a new hosting provider? Have a new website you want to get going? To use the very hosting provider used by this podcast, go to hosting.bogosity.tv and you can sign up for many different hosting solutions, including shared hosting, WordPress hosting, reseller hosting, and even managed and unmanaged VPS and VDS hosting. And by using my link, you'll get $20 off and a free site migration. Enjoy fast, secure, and scalable web hosting with built-in automated backups and a unified control panel designed for flexibility and growth. They've made things incredibly easy with their AI website builder, or go more advanced with their VPS hosting, giving you full root access to your choice of Linux OS. Let their experts take care of patches, performance tuning, security hardening, monitoring, and daily ops, all with responsive and knowledgeable support. Whatever your hosting needs are, you can find them at hosting.bogosity.tv. And now let's post-quaternary glottomatalize this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
I just don't understand Europe. They're like that bratty kid that just doesn't want to listen. They don't get why we Americans love things like insulating our homes and having HVAC systems. They do stupid things like shut down all the nuclear plants, then wonder why they're freezing in winter. Now, as if nature is just driving the point home of how stupid they're being, a heat dome has just parked itself over Europe and causing what researchers say is the worst heat wave ever recorded. Germany, which froze its ass off in the last couple of winters, broke its all-time record, and Spain hit the highest with a scorching 45.1 degrees Celsius. That's 113 Fahrenheit for those of you who prefer sensible scales. Superheated air coming off of the Sahara is refueling the dome, causing above-average temperatures from Portugal to Poland. Even cooler climates like the UK, Denmark, Switzerland, and the Netherlands are setting local records. The WHO has called it a health emergency. Over the past 4 years, excessive heat has killed 200,000 people across Europe. And this, people, is why we like our air conditioning. I know you're gonna say you couldn't predict this, but don't you realize you should prepare for the unpredictable? Geez, your governments are doing all they can to make sure your phone chargers plug in correctly, but preventing hundreds of thousands of deaths is met with a shrug? Get the nuke plants going again, insulate your damn houses, and install HVAC. Then you'll be able to manage your activities so you can deal with the unexpected without dying. This isn't the medieval period, which, now that I come to think of it, was warmer as well. Okay, so you're dumber than people in the medieval period who didn't have AC because it didn't exist. So seriously, what's your excuse? So all of that makes Europe this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
Well, that wraps up this Chump Don't Want the Hip, Chump Don't Get the Hip edition of the Bogosity podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please go to donate.bogosity.tv for several ways to support, and discord.bogosity.tv to join the discussion. Subscribe at Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord, and you can listen early and ad-free. Thank you for listening. Remember, no podcast next week, so we'll return in 2 weeks. Until then, here's a quote from Tim Slagle. People say, well, in Europe they have gun control. In Europe they have socialized medicine. Yeah, you know what? In Europe they have state religions and monarchs. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Bogosity.